Story 1. I never thought I'd be afraid to be alone. Not because I'm the anxious type. Quite the opposite. I've always been someone who needed space, who cherished silence and took comfort in being by myself. I was the kid who played alone in her room, the teenager who chose books over parties, the adult who learned how to repair drywall from YouTube because waiting on someone else felt like a waste of time. So when I signed the closing paperwork on my first home, my house, bought with my money, I felt nothing but pride. No fear, no hesitation. Just a long, satisfied exhale. The place was a 2-bedroom ranch-style house in a sleepy suburb called Brookvale, Utah. Not exactly scenic, but affordable, with decent schools, tidy lawns, and neighbors who waved from across the street without getting too friendly. It was the kind of town where people grilled burgers on Sundays and left their porch lights on for trick-or-treaters. Seemed like a safe bet. I was 29, single, working full-time as a digital layout designer for an interior architecture firm in Salt Lake City. I'd been saving for almost 5 years, cutting back on everything from takeout to streaming subscriptions, and finally had enough for a down payment on a house that didn't have mold, foundation issues, or an HOA breathing down my neck. My friends were excited for me. My parents were hesitant, the way parents are, tossing me lines like, "Are you sure you want to live out there all alone?" Or, "Maybe you should get a roommate just for a while." But they weren't paying my mortgage, so I smiled, thanked them, and kept packing boxes. Moving day was cold and gray. Late October. The trees had just started shedding their last leaves, and the wind carried that dry, papery smell that always reminded me of high school cross-country. My co-worker Trina helped me move, along with her boyfriend Keith. They brought coffee, 2 dollies, and a Bluetooth speaker that played nothing but old-school R&B the entire time. We laughed, we sweat, we swore when the box spring got wedged in the hallway. Afterward, we sat on the living room floor eating cheap pizza from Big Mario's and drinking warm beer from a cooler. "You gonna be okay here by yourself?" Keith asked, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. I grinned. "More than okay. I've been waiting for this since I was 19. Trina raised her bottle. "To independence." We clinked, and for a moment, I really did feel untouchable. The first night was quiet. Eerily so. No roommates, no street noise, no upstairs neighbor stomping around in heels. Just the creaks and sighs of an old house adjusting to colder weather. I slept with the TV on low, not out of fear, just habit. A documentary about forgotten amusement parks flickered behind my eyelids until sleep finally took me. Sometime around 3 a.m., I woke up to a soft sound. A scrape. Then another. I sat up, disoriented. The house was dark except for the dim glow of my bedside lamp. I paused the documentary. Silence. I listened harder. Nothing. Just settling, I whispered to myself. It was an old house. There would be noises. I lay back down. But as the days passed, the sounds kept coming. Subtle, sporadic, always at night. 3 weeks in, I was putting dishes away when I heard it again. 3 sharp thumps, like someone knocking softly on a door, followed by a low, dragging sound. It seemed to come from the hallway vent. I froze, dish in hand. It wasn't the first time I'd heard something like that, but this was the clearest yet. I crouched by the vent and pressed my ear to it. Nothing but faint air movement. I even called out, "Hello?" Feeling dumb the moment the word left my mouth. Still, nothing. The next morning, I texted my dad. "Hey, can animals get into air ducts?" He replied in seconds. "Mice, maybe. Bigger stuff? Doubt it. Why? Hearing sounds, like movement, from the vents. Probably nothing. But check the crawlspace just in case." So I did. The crawlspace access was in the hallway closet. I grabbed a flashlight, pulled up the panel, and shined the light around. Just dirt, insulation, some cobwebs. No signs of animals, no chew marks or nests. Still, the noises continued. Sometimes faint, sometimes deliberate. About a month after I moved in, I had a nightmare. I was in the house, but it wasn't mine. The walls were peeling, the lights buzzing dimly overhead. I walked through a narrow hallway, and from the floor vents, I could hear crying. A girl's voice whispering, "Please, please help me." When I woke, I was soaked in sweat. The hallway vent cover had fallen off, just lying there on the carpet. I didn't scream. I didn't panic. I got up, walked over, and reattached the vent with trembling hands, pretending it was just loose to begin with. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. 2 days later, I asked Trina to come over. I needed to not be alone. She brought wine and watched me pace around my kitchen. "You seriously think someone's—" "What? Living in your vents?" "I don't know," I snapped. Something's wrong. I can feel it." Trina looked skeptical but kind. "Look, I believe you're hearing stuff. Old houses make weird noises. My grandma's place sounded like it was alive half the time." "It's not just sounds," I whispered. I told her about the dream, the vent cover, the scrape that sounded like fingernails. We didn't talk for a moment. Then, with a sigh, she said, "Let's check it out." We unscrewed the vent cover in the hallway and shined a flashlight inside. The duct was narrow. Too narrow for anyone to crawl through, but something had definitely been in there. There were scratches along the metal, long, parallel gouges. Not from animals, not from tools, from fingers. Trina pulled her hand back fast. "Jesus, okay, that's not normal." We checked every vent we could access. Some were dusty but undisturbed. But one, near the back bedroom, had something stuck in the slats. A piece of paper, folded tightly, pushed just far enough in that it wasn't visible unless you looked directly into the vent. I carefully pulled it out. It was torn notebook paper, smudged and yellowing. In shaky handwriting, it read, "My name is Ellie. I'm 13. Please help me. He's in the walls." We stared at it in stunned silence. Trina finally spoke. "You need to call the police." Detective Ron Alvarez showed up that night with a younger officer, Claire something. They were polite, patient, and, at first, clearly skeptical. I told them everything, the sounds, the dream, the note. Alvarez examined the vent, took the paper in a sealed evidence bag, and asked if I'd altered anything. "No," I said. "We just unscrewed the cover." Officer Claire did a full walkthrough with me while Alvarez checked the crawlspace and attic. Nothing unusual. "We'll run the note through missing persons," he said. "See if anything matches. In the meantime, do you have somewhere else you can stay?" I did. My parents, an hour south. But I didn't leave. It was my house. I wasn't going to be scared out of it. I should have gone. That night, I left my bedroom door open, just in case. The hall light stayed on. Around 2:40 a.m., I woke up with a dry throat and went to the kitchen for water. As I passed the hallway vent, I felt it. Cold. Not like AC, not air movement. Cold breath. And then, movement. Behind the slats, 2 eyes, wide, shiny, childlike. I screamed. The vent cover burst outward with a crash and something flew at me, small, fast, human. I fell, slammed my head on the hardwood. When I opened my eyes, there was a girl crouched over me. Thin, filthy, wearing what looked like a child's nightgown torn at the shoulders. Her face was gaunt and her lips were cracked. Her hands twitched like spiders. "You saw me," she whispered. I couldn't move. My body was frozen, my mind screaming. "I told them," she said. "I told them I was real." And then she ran, fast, down the hallway, into the back bedroom. I scrambled to my feet, hit the wall trying to turn too fast, and followed. But the room was empty. Only the open vent in the floor remained, now bent and rattling. Police came again. This time, I wasn't the only one shaken. Detective Alvarez called in forensics. They found tufts of hair in the ducts, fibers from fabric, fingerprints. Too many for just me. They brought in animal control, a structural engineer, a forensic psychologist. Eventually, the pieces came together. 10 years ago, a man named Daryl Tennant owned the house. A quiet, middle-aged loner. On the outside, just another neighbor. Inside? A predator. He'd abducted a girl named Ellie Rodriguez from West Valley City in 2012. She was never found. He died in 2015. Heart attack. House was inherited by a cousin, then sold twice before it landed in foreclosure. Each new owner only stayed a few months. None of them ever looked in the vents. Until me. They found her remains deep in the air duct system, past the insulation, behind a false metal panel near the furnace, a place no one had touched in years. I sold the house 3 weeks later. Took a loss. Didn't care. I moved back to my parents' place for a while. Got a therapist. Started running again. Tried not to sleep during the day so the dreams wouldn't come back. They still do sometimes. In them, I see Ellie, not as she was found, but as she was in that moment, crouched over me, whispering, "You saw me." And I wonder how long she was waiting. How many nights she whispered into the vents, hoping someone, anyone, would listen. And I wonder, if I hadn't, would she still be there, waiting, watching? Story 2. I never thought I'd leave North Charlotte. Not really. Even as a kid, I knew I was the type who got anxious when furniture got moved, let alone whole lives. I liked patterns. I liked familiar streetlights. I liked hearing the same train pass 3 blocks away at 3:21 a.m. every night. I was 12 the summer we left, and if you'd asked me then, I would have told you we were ruining our lives. Dad had lost his job the previous winter. Some logistics company folded. Mom, who'd been working as a nurse at a small urgent care, got offered a position with a home health agency that covered most of rural southern Tennessee. That's how we ended up moving to Barrow Hill. Barrow Hill wasn't a town so much as a cluster of farmland and trees scattered along 2-lane roads with numbers instead of names. No stoplights, 1 gas station, 1 post office, and a hardware store that doubled as a diner. We moved into a white 2-story house with gray shutters and a wraparound porch on 5 acres of property just off Deerlick Road. It was about 20 minutes from the nearest real grocery store. The house backed right up to forest. No fence, no neighbors in sight, just trees pressing in, close and quiet. It wasn't run down, just old. Built in 1936, according to the listing. The hardwood floors dipped in places, like waves frozen mid-crest. Doors never stayed open unless you wedged something under them. The place smelled like cedar and dust and something else, like dried leaves and metal. Not bad, just old. My little brother Noah was 8, and he was thrilled. Said the house looked like something out of a movie. Mom said it was peaceful. Dad kept repeating how lucky we were to own property like this. I said nothing. I missed my friends. I missed the Waffle House 2 blocks from our old apartment. I missed hearing people, not just birds and wind. Our dog, Toby, a 6-year-old golden retriever mix, adjusted faster than I did. He trotted through the place like he'd been born there, sniffing corners, tail wagging. The first night, he curled up at the foot of my bed like he always did, and I figured maybe things would settle. They didn't. We spent the first 2 days unpacking. I picked the upstairs bedroom that faced the woods. I didn't love the idea of that view, but it was better than sharing with Noah. My window looked out on a wall of pine and oak, so thick you couldn't see more than 15 feet into the trees. No birds sang at night, which bothered me more than I admitted. On the 3rd day, while we were still arranging furniture, a knock came at the front door. It was a man, thin, older, maybe late 60s, wearing scuffed boots and a dark green coat despite the heat. His eyes were small and pale, and he smiled just a bit too long. "Afternoon," he said. Heard folks moved in. Name's Ray. I live just up yonder past the creek. Dad stepped onto the porch and shook his hand. Nice to meet you. I'm Paul. This is my wife, Dana, and our kids, Emma and Noah. Ray nodded at each of us, then looked right at me. Held my eyes a second too long. Quiet one, he said. That's good. Not enough quiet kids these days. I didn't say anything, just looked down. Something about him felt wrong. Not dangerous. Just off. He stayed about 10 minutes, mostly chatting with Dad. Said there weren't many folks around. Warned us about coyotes, snakes, the usual. Woods here go on for miles, he said before leaving. Easy to get turned around if you don't know 'em. That night I had trouble sleeping. Not fear exactly, just unease. Toby was restless too. He shifted at my feet, ears twitching every few minutes. Around 2:30 a.m., he sat up and stared at the window. Just stared. No growl, no bark. Just tense, eyes fixed. I got up and looked out. Nothing. Just woods and fog creeping low through the trees. Things got worse the following week. I was playing in the yard with Noah and Toby while Mom made lunch. Dad was still at the hardware store getting paint. Noah ran inside to use the bathroom, and I sat in the grass, flicking ants off my leg. I didn't hear anyone approach. One moment I was alone. The next, Ray was standing 5 feet away. Howdy again, he said, and I flinched. Toby barked, once, and stood between us stiff-legged. Didn't mean to spook ya, Ray said, raising both hands. Just out walking, saw you out here. I nodded but didn't say anything. My hands felt cold. You ever go into the woods? He asked. Plenty of old things back there. Stone fences, old wells. Even saw a deer skull once, cleaned clean by bugs. I didn't answer. He looked at me for a long second, then smiled again. Too wide this time. Best stay out, though, he said. Things in there ain't always friendly. Before I could speak, the screen door banged open and Mom stepped out onto the porch. Everything okay? She called. Ray tipped his hat. All good, just chatting. Mom didn't smile. You need something? Ray paused. Just being neighborly, he said. Then he walked off down the side of the property toward the woods. Toby watched him the whole way, ears low. That night, I dreamed of footsteps crunching leaves. When I woke up, I wasn't sure if I'd heard something outside or not. Toby was staring at the window again. 2 nights later, I knew I hadn't imagined it. It was 3:04 a.m. The red digits on my clock glared in the dark. Toby started growling, low and steady. Then he barked once, sharp and urgent, and ran to the window. I sat up, heart in my throat. Someone was standing at the tree line. Not close, maybe 30 feet back, just visible in the moonlight. A shape, tall, still, watching. I froze. I didn't breathe. Then it moved. Stepped back into the trees. Vanished. I ran into my parents' room. Dad got up, grabbed the pistol he kept in a lockbox, and went outside with the flashlight. He walked the property for nearly an hour. Nothing. No prints, no sign. We reported it the next day. Sheriff came out, took a statement. Said it was probably a drifter or a hunter who got lost. Still, he said, Ray's the only one who lives near y'all. That's when Dad told him what Ray looked like. The sheriff frowned. I know everyone on Deer Lick. No one named Ray lives near here. Closest Ray I know is Ray Landry, and he died 6 years ago. Lived near the creek, though. House burned down. Nothing left but stone steps. We all went quiet. Dad drove down that way later. Found the spot. Just broken steps, scorched beams, and ivy-covered debris. There hadn't been a house there in years. Things escalated after that. Scratches appeared on the back door. At night, we heard rustling in the woods, too rhythmic to be wind. Toby refused to go out after dark. My little brother started waking up crying, saying someone was knocking on his window. Then came the voice. It started as a whisper. I was half asleep when I heard it. A soft, raspy call just outside the glass. Emma, I shot up. The voice came again. Emma, come see. Toby lunged at the window, barking so hard he shook the walls. I screamed. Lights came on. Dad rushed in. But when he got outside, nothing. We moved 2 months later. My parents told people it was the commute, the isolation, too much work to maintain the property. But I know the truth. Something was in those woods. Something that pretended to be a neighbor. Something that watched, waited. I never went back to Barrow Hill. None of us did. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I still hear my name whispered in that same cracked voice. And I wake up sweating, heart pounding, certain that behind my eyelids I'll see pale eyes at the window. But it's just fear. I hope. Story 3. I thought I needed a fresh start. That's what I kept telling myself after the breakup. 5 years of my life down the drain, and suddenly I was 30, single, and paying way too much rent for a 1-bedroom in downtown Asheville. When Marcus left, it wasn't messy. It was worse, cold, muted, like something slowly shutting down instead of breaking all at once. After a while, you stop fighting and just let it go. A month later, I told my mom I was thinking of buying a house. Half joking, half desperate for something to look forward to. She surprised me by saying she'd co-sign a loan. You need roots, Elle, she said. Something to hold on to. Elliot, that's me. Full name Elliot James Hargrove. Freelance UX designer, works from home type, not exactly rugged or outdoorsy, but I knew how to keep a place clean and the bills paid. I started house hunting the week after Thanksgiving. Didn't expect much. Maybe a fixer-upper. Maybe a 2-bedroom with creaky pipes and a dated kitchen. I wasn't afraid of a little elbow grease. I found the listing for 17 Wood Hollow Drive on a Thursday night, scrolling mindlessly between gigs. It was a modest cottage-style place about 20 minutes outside of the city in a town I'd never heard of. Brookridge. The photos were underwhelming but honest. Hardwood floors, a stone fireplace, oddly shaped living room, a narrow staircase leading to a tiny second floor with slanted ceilings. But it was quiet and affordable. And this is the part that stuck. The seller had just lowered the asking price by $20,000. That made it too tempting to ignore. I booked a tour that weekend. The agent met me outside. She was chipper, maybe too much so. Kept talking about how cozy the house was, how peaceful the neighborhood had always been. When I asked why the price dropped, she paused before saying, "The previous owner passed unexpectedly. His nephew inherited it and doesn't want to keep it. The inside smelled like mothballs and cedar. It was cold even with the heat on, like the air didn't know how to move through the walls anymore. The furniture had been cleared out except for an old mirror by the stairs, a roll-top desk in the corner, and a single chair facing the fireplace. Its upholstery torn in places, threadbare, wood polished from years of hands and backs sliding over it. Something about that chair rubbed me wrong. I didn't know why at the time. Just a vague discomfort. Still, the price was right. I put in an offer that night. The nephew accepted 2 days later. I moved in January 4th, just before a snowstorm blanketed the town in white. I moved everything in by myself. My brother Aaron offered to help, but I told him I wanted the space, wanted to sit in the quiet and let it feel real. There was a kind of thrill in claiming a place as your own. Mine. I set up my desk in the sunroom, unpacked the kitchen essentials, and made a makeshift bed in the living room since I hadn't tackled the upstairs yet. Around 9 p.m., I turned on a lamp, lit one of those overpriced woodsy candles I'd bought from a holiday market, and sank into a beanbag chair with a sandwich. It felt okay. The silence was bigger than I expected, though. Out here, there weren't cars humming by or neighbors shouting through the walls. Just creaks, settling. The occasional gust of wind against the siding. It felt like the house was holding its breath. Somewhere around midnight, I woke up cold. The fire had died, and the power flickered when I stood. A low humming sound came from upstairs, barely there, like the whine of an old TV. I froze, listening. It wasn't the heater. It wasn't anything mechanical. I climbed the stairs slowly, flashlight in hand. The second floor had 2 rooms, one of which I planned to turn into an office. The hum grew louder near the smaller room. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. Nothing. Just empty walls and old floorboards and the mirror. A full-length standing mirror I hadn't noticed before, covered by a thin white sheet. I lifted the corner just to be sure. My face stared back, but the hum stopped the moment I touched the glass. I left the room without removing the cover. By day 3, I'd chalked up most of the weirdness to nerves. Moving was stressful. The quiet was new. I figured the mirror had some kind of loose panel or resonance that made the sound, but I still hadn't touched it again. That chair, though, the one by the fireplace, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I moved it to the garage. Not because I was scared exactly, just because it didn't fit. Still, I felt its absence in the room like a missing tooth. That night, I had my first dream. I was walking through the house, barefoot, the hardwood icy under my feet. The lights wouldn't turn on. I moved through the kitchen into the hallway. Then I saw it. A man, sitting in that same chair. Back turned to me, head tilted just slightly like he was listening. I couldn't see his face. He started to rock, slow and steady. Back and forth. The floor groaned under him. I tried to speak, but no words came. Then he stopped and turned his head. I woke up gasping. My hands were freezing. The next morning, I went out to the garage. The chair was gone. I didn't tell anyone right away. It sounded crazy, and I wasn't even sure it had happened. Maybe I'd moved it and forgotten. Maybe I donated it. But the dreams kept coming. I called Aaron the next week. "You sound like you're getting cabin fever, man," he said, laughing. "Come crash at my place for a weekend. We'll get wings, watch bad movies." "Yeah," I said. "Maybe." But I didn't go. I needed to see it through. I needed to believe the house wasn't winning. I started noticing smaller things. The mirror upstairs was uncovered one morning. I knew I hadn't touched it. A light in the hallway flickered even after I changed the bulb. The front door creaked open twice while I was home, even after I locked it. On the 15th night, I woke to a smell. Smoke. Not fire, but something burned, like cedar and old paper. I ran downstairs, heart hammering. The fireplace was cold, but the chair was back. Same spot, same angle, same worn pattern on the arms. I stood there a long time. I didn't move it. I just went back to bed and didn't sleep. I went into town the next morning, found a little library with an archive room and asked about the house. An older woman named Rose helped me dig. Turns out, 17 Wood Hollow Drive had once belonged to a man named Walter Kearns, a retired music teacher. Lived alone most of his life. Neighbors said he was polite but odd, kept to himself. Played piano every night until his arthritis got bad. Died in his sleep 6 months ago. But before him, there was someone else. A woman, Marla Dorsey, the house's original owner. She died in 1981, but her death wasn't natural. She was found in the living room, sitting in that same chair. Cause of death, cardiac arrest. But there were signs she'd been sitting there for hours before anyone found her. No struggle, just silence. The chair had always been there, even back then. Rose leaned closer. That house was always strange, she said quietly. My cousin lived across the street. Said she'd see someone moving through the upstairs window at night, even after Walter moved in. I asked what she meant. She just shrugged. Some houses, remember? I tried to leave the chair alone. I really did. But one night I walked past it and heard something. Not a creak. A whisper. Stay. I spun around, heart slamming. No one there. The mirror upstairs cracked the next morning. A clean split down the center, like a parting line. I packed a bag and left that day. Stayed with Aaron for a week. When I returned, I brought someone with me, an old friend of my mom's named Diana. She wasn't a priest or anything, but she believed in energies, in places holding on to things. She stood in the living room a long time, eyes closed, breathing slow. Then she said, "You need to let her go." "Who?" I asked. "The woman who never left, the one still waiting for someone to come home." Diana helped me burn lavender and cedar. She told me to speak aloud, tell the house it wasn't hers anymore, that it was time to rest. I did. Nothing changed, not right away. But I never dreamed about the man again. The chair stayed, but it never moved. I sold the house 6 months later to a couple from Michigan. They loved it, called it charming. Now I live in a modern apartment now. No fireplace, no strange mirrors. But some nights, when it's especially quiet, I still think about that house. About the way it breathed when you weren't paying attention. About the way the light would bend just slightly wrong across the hardwood. About the whisper. And sometimes, when I wake too early, I swear I can hear it again. Just the faintest creak. Back and forth. Back and forth. Story 4. I didn't grow up with much. No family home to return to for the holidays. No childhood bedroom preserved in time. I bounced between apartments with my mom until I left for college. And after that, I moved from city to city. Chicago, then Des Moines. A short stint in Kansas City. Always chasing work. Always starting over. So when I finally got a stable job offer at 29, I thought maybe it was time to root myself somewhere. The job was with a mid-sized logistics firm called Crosswell Intermodal, managing their UX design department. Nothing glamorous, but it paid well. Benefits, stability. They were based out of Redfield, Indiana, a quiet town that felt more like a pit stop between bigger cities. I'd never heard of it before they contacted me on LinkedIn, but the numbers were too good to ignore. I accepted in mid-October. They wanted me there by December. The company offered relocation assistance but didn't have any housing partnerships, so I was left to find something on my own. Redfield wasn't big enough to have dedicated rental apps. Most listings were on a janky community website or Facebook groups. After a week of scrolling through yellow-lit photos of linoleum kitchens and faded carpet, I found a listing that stood out. 437 Elmridge Lane. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, brick exterior, detached garage, big backyard. The photos showed a clean, simple place, modest but cared for. New paint, updated windows, a pale blue door with a brass knocker. It was exactly what I needed. The owner, a woman named Susan Grant, responded to my inquiry within the hour. "It's available starting November 25th. We had it cleaned last week. Previous tenant moved out in August." We scheduled a video tour. Susan was in her 60s, gentle voice, cropped silver hair. She lived 2 counties over and said the home used to belong to her father. He passed in May. I just couldn't bring myself to sell it yet. Thought I'd rent it out for a while. I signed the lease that weekend. I left Kansas City on the morning of November 24th, the day before Thanksgiving. A 5-hour drive stretched to nearly 8 thanks to sleet and endless construction zones. By the time I pulled into Redfield, it was dark. Not just evening dark, rural Indiana dark. The kind that makes you second-guess your headlights. Elmridge Lane was at the edge of town. A row of 10 or so homes, modest and mostly one-story, spaced apart with empty lots and overgrown hedges between them. My rental was near the end of the road, where the pavement thinned and trees closed in from both sides. I parked my rented U-Haul in the driveway and just sat for a moment, the engine ticking as it cooled. The house looked smaller in person. The porch light was on, casting a yellow glow across the steps. I grabbed my overnight bag, walked up, and used the code Susan had texted to open the lockbox. The key turned smoothly. The inside smelled like nothing. Not fresh paint, not musty, just empty. Still. The kind of stillness that felt intentional. But I told myself it was just a quiet neighborhood. The first night was always going to be weird. New sounds, new layout. The air mattress I'd thrown down in the back bedroom hissed as it filled. I ordered cheap pizza, called my sister to say I made it safe, then walked through the house with a flashlight app, since only half the ceiling lights worked. The living room had new laminate flooring. The hallway creaked like an old stage. The bathroom had a brand new toilet, but the mirror had a small crack in the corner like a spiderweb pressed into glass. Still, I liked it. It had that blank slate feeling I needed. Until around 3 a.m., something woke me. A noise. Not loud, but there. A soft, rhythmic tap, like a finger against wood. I sat up, heart already working harder than it should have. The room was dark, but not pitch. The blinds let in a faint smear of streetlight. I held my breath, listening. Tap, tap, definitely not the wind. Too steady. I stood slowly and tiptoed toward the hallway. My phone flashlight cast long shadows against the walls. I passed the bathroom, then the utility closet. The tapping got louder. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the kitchen. I turned the corner fast, swinging the light across the room. Nothing. The kitchen was empty. The window above the sink was closed. So was the back door. But the tap came again, this time directly beneath my feet. Basement. I hadn't noticed the basement door when I moved in. It was beside the fridge, painted the same color as the wall. Blended in. I reached for the knob. It was cold. Tap. Right below me. I turned it, slowly, and opened the door. The smell hit first, damp, earthy, like wet concrete and old wood. I pointed the light down. Narrow stairs, unfinished. Bare bulbs on a wire, none of them lit. I stepped back. Nope. No reason to go down there at 3 a.m. on my first night. I shut the door, locked it with the little sliding bolt, and tried to laugh it off. New house, old sounds, probably a loose pipe, or a raccoon trapped in the vent. Still, I slept with the hallway light on after that. Thanksgiving morning, I woke groggy. Outside, a thin frost had painted the lawn silver. I made coffee, unpacked some basics, and tried to shake the leftover nerves. I wasn't seeing family this year. Too far, too tired. I'd just moved. Everyone understood. Around noon, I got a text from Susan. "Everything okay with the house?" I almost replied, "Yeah, perfect, just to keep things easy," but I hesitated. Then I wrote, "Mostly good. Think I heard something from the basement last night. Could be an animal?" She replied quickly. "The basement doesn't have any access points. It's sealed up tight. Just storage down there. Probably old pipes expanding." Then, oddly, "Don't go down there alone. Stairs are steep. I've been meaning to fix the railing." That night, I couldn't sleep. It wasn't the tapping this time. It was movement. I'd hear it. Then silence. Then again. Faint creaks, like weight shifting on the boards below. I tried music, a podcast, but everything felt too loud in that quiet. At one point, I got up to check the kitchen again. This time, the basement door was open. Just slightly. Enough to see the first step. I hadn't touched the lock since the night before. I stood frozen, every muscle screaming to run. Then, from down below, I heard it. Not a tap, not a creak. A voice. Faint. Hoarse. "Hello?" I slammed the door, locked it, shoved a chair under the handle. My chest felt like it might cave in. Someone was down there. I called the police. By the time the officer arrived, young guy named Officer Lund, the house felt too quiet again. No voice, no sound. I explained everything, shaky and embarrassed. He took a flashlight and went down the stairs while I waited in the kitchen, trying not to cry. When he came back up 10 minutes later, he looked pale. There's old stuff down there, he said. Tools, boxes, a cot, and a coffee can full of cigarette butts. Is someone living down there? He hesitated. Not now, but they were. He had me wait outside while he called for backup. 2 more officers showed up. They cleared the entire property. No one was there. But they agreed. Someone had been. No forced entry. They figured whoever it was had keys or access. Maybe the previous tenant left them. Maybe they'd been hiding since August. I moved into a motel that night. I didn't go back to 437 Elmridge Lane. Susan agreed to cancel the lease and even wired me back the deposit. She was upset. She said she'd have the locks changed, hire someone to seal the basement entirely. I don't know how this could have happened, she kept saying. No one's supposed to have keys but me. I found a new rental across town a few weeks later. Newer construction, no basement. I stayed in Redfield for the job. I still live here, but sometimes, when I can't sleep, I hear it again in my head. That voice. Hello? Like it didn't expect to be heard. Like it had been waiting for someone to answer. And I still wonder, if I'd gone down those stairs, would I have found someone? Or something that didn't want to be found? Story 5, I hadn't planned on moving again. Not after everything. But when things fall apart, really fall apart, all you can do is survive. And sometimes that means starting from scratch. Again. I left Chicago in late March. The city was still coughing up winter, and so was I in my own way. I'd been living there with Marcus for nearly 6 years. Same apartment, same morning routines, same fights recycled with different endings. When he died suddenly of a heart attack last fall, the apartment didn't just feel empty. It felt wrong. Like I didn't belong there anymore. Like my life had been a play, and someone pulled the curtain down before I could rehearse the final act. Grief makes you restless. It also makes you reckless. So I packed what little I cared to keep into the back of my gray Toyota and drove 12 hours west, toward a place I'd only seen in pictures. Fairhill, Iowa. Small, rural, quiet. It wasn't chosen for charm or beauty. It was chosen because I could afford it. That's what you do when you're 35, alone, and unsure how to be anything else anymore. You pick quiet over everything. The house I bought was a small, single-story place tucked into a curve off Mill Creek Road, just past where the asphalt turned to gravel. 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, detached garage, and 2 acres of woodland I didn't ask for but got anyway. The listing called it a hidden gem with rustic charm. The siding was faded yellow, the shutters sun-bleached to a near-bone white. It had sat empty for years. I signed the papers 2 weeks after my first visit. Didn't tell anyone but my sister. I wasn't running from life. I told myself that. I was just rearranging it. The first few days were the kind of silence you don't know you've missed until you hear it. No sirens, no honking, no neighbors screaming through drywall. Just birds, wind, and the occasional thump of a squirrel vaulting from one tree to another. I spent my time unpacking, sweeping dead leaves off the porch, listening to old jazz records while cleaning windows streaked with time. I walked barefoot through the hallway, letting my fingertips graze the roughness of the walls. I slept with the windows cracked and the fan humming like a lullaby. It felt like healing. Until it didn't. It was the 4th night when the knocking started. I had just finished dinner, roast chicken from the deli and a can of seltzer, when I heard it. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Not frantic, not soft, just deliberate. I froze. It was already dark. The porch light, installed in the 90s by the look of it, barely cast enough glow to light the first step. I wasn't expecting anyone. No one even knew I lived here besides Kelly, and she was in Denver. I peeked through the side window. A man stood on my porch. He was older, maybe late 50s or early 60s. His posture was too still, too stiff, like someone trying to pretend they belonged. He wore a brown canvas jacket and jeans that hung loosely off his frame, mud caked around the hems. His skin was wind-chapped and deeply lined, and his hair, gray and shoulder length, was tucked behind his ears. I opened the door but left the screen shut. "Can I help you?" He didn't smile, just nodded once. "Evening." "Evening," I said back slowly. "Name's Marlin. Live about a mile down Mill Creek. Saw your car, figured I'd say hello." His voice was rough, like gravel being stirred. "Oh," I said. "Thanks, I'm Eva, just moved in." He nodded again. No handshake, no welcome basket. Just a blank stare that sat a second too long on my face. "Nice little place," he said finally, eyes still fixed on mine. "Yeah, thanks. Well, I'll let you get back to your night." He turned and walked off the porch, disappearing into the dark faster than I expected. I shut the door and locked it, both the knob and the deadbolt. Something about him unsettled me. Not dangerous exactly, just off, like a sentence that didn't quite end the right way. The second knock came the next night. Same pattern. 3 slow, deliberate raps. I'd just gotten out of the shower. My hair was dripping. My towel barely clung to me. I grabbed a hoodie, threw it on over leggings, and padded to the door in bare feet. Same man, same jacket, same expression. I didn't open the door this time, just stood behind the wood and spoke through it. "Can I help you? You settling in all right?" he asked. "Fine, thanks." "Anything you need?" "Number, I'm good." Another long pause. Then he said, "Sometimes the woods play tricks at night. Strange noises. Best to keep lights on." "Okay, thanks." That time, he stayed longer. Even after I told him goodnight, I watched his shadow linger on the porch for another 30 seconds before it disappeared into the dark. By the 5th night, I was keeping a hammer beside the bed. By the 6th, I'd moved it into the drawer under the couch. On the 7th night, he didn't knock. I thought maybe he was done. Maybe I'd misjudged everything and he was just some lonely old man trying to be neighborly in his own weird way. Until 2:44 a.m., when my phone buzzed. Motion detected. Front porch camera. I sat up, heart already pounding. I'd installed the cameras that morning, cheap ones I could monitor from my phone. The alert opened to a grainy black and white view of my porch. Empty. But just as I was about to close the app, movement flickered in the corner. A shape, just out of range. A shoulder maybe, or a sleeve. Someone standing deliberately where they wouldn't be seen fully. He was watching the camera. Watching me. I called the sheriff's office. A deputy named Ashford came out the next afternoon. He was young, polite, and didn't once make me feel crazy for being scared. "We don't have a Marlin on file," he said after checking his notepad. "No one with that name owns land within 3 miles of here." "Could he be squatting?" I asked. He shrugged. "Could be. Woods back here are thick, but most folks around here don't bother anyone." He walked the perimeter with me, found some footprints in the soft mud near the back fence line. They led toward the forest, but nothing definitive. "You see him again? Call us. Doesn't matter what time." 2 nights later, I woke up to the sound of someone whispering outside my bedroom window. It was faint, muffled, like a voice trying to stay hidden. I didn't move, just lay in bed, eyes wide, ears straining. The whispering stopped. Then came the knock. Not on the door this time, on the glass. Software tap, 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 like a fingernail. I sat up and grabbed my phone. The live feed from the backyard camera was dark. No movement. But I knew he was there. Tap, tap, tap. I whispered 911 into the phone and ducked into the closet, hammer in one hand, phone in the other. Dispatch kept me talking. Officers en route. Stay on the line. I heard the back door creak, then footsteps in the kitchen. My heart nearly stopped. The hammer felt useless. I was going to die with a hammer in my hand and a stranger walking barefoot through my house. And then I heard shouting. "Sheriff's Department, come out now!" Doors slammed, wood cracked. Silence. Then, "Ma'am, you can come out now." They found him in the crawl space under my house. He'd been staying there, living there. A sleeping bag, bottles of water, a knife, a journal. The journal had my name written over and over. And one entry. "She doesn't belong here, but I do. I was here first." They arrested him. No ID, no record, nothing matching any known missing persons. They don't know who he is, or where he came from, or how long he'd been watching the house. He was just there, watching, waiting. I still live on Mill Creek Road, but I sleep with a baseball bat beside my bed now. Got a dog, big one, shepherd mix named Jude. He growls at the woods sometimes, even when there's nothing there. I keep the lights on at night, and I never, ever open the door after dark. Because in the quiet, even when it feels like the world has left you alone, someone might be watching, waiting for the right moment, and you'll never hear them coming until they knock.